We're here, Movement Mortgage, to interview Casey Crawford, the CEO, the founder of an organization that really is changing lives, both its employees and its partners, those that use their services and their products to help buy homes for themselves. Last year alone, they did $610 million in revenue. They were one of the top 10 loan originators in the country. These guys are getting it done both inside this building and outside. One of the other really unique things about Movement is these signs that they have in their office, okay? They're not afraid to put their core values and their beliefs everywhere. If you go in the bathroom, you'll see signs. It's one of the most unique cultures I've ever been around.
Here we go.
Well, Casey, the story of Movement Mortgage, we now kind of know where you are today. Explosion of growth, 4,500 employees. I mean, just incredible stuff. But I want to go back to the beginning. You're sitting in a chair in a coffee shop with Toby,
Yep.
your co-founder.
Yep.
What gave you the idea that a mortgage company in 2008 was a good idea?
Toby, probably. Toby, I was really blessed to have a partner that is just a man of vision. Toby could talk you into going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro today. Toby's 70 years old and probably has more energy today than I do. He's a really dynamic, charismatic guy, and he'd been around the industry a long time. And at that time in the industry, we were in about as rough a period as it had ever seen. Since really the genesis of the mortgage-backed security, Lou Ranieri. And what we saw in the midst of all that adversity was really an incredible opportunity. We fundamentally believed these big blocks were still in place to create the need for a mortgage bank. And those big blocks were that Americans were going to continue to buy homes. We thought the federal government was going to continue to facilitate home ownership and probably step in to subsidize the cost of credit, really, because the economy was on the rocks. This is 07, 08. So this is really just we're barreling into the Great Recession. At that same time, guys like Countrywide, Bank of America, Wachovia, IndyMac are just being leveled from the marketplace, being wiped out of the marketplace completely. So you had this massive demand. You had the people that were going to traditionally create the supply of mortgages being eliminated, and this huge opportunity, right in front of us. So, in hindsight, again, it looks a lot clearer than it did at the time, because at the time you're going, man, this does not feel like what we should be walking into. Let's go start a mortgage bank while the biggest ones are going out of business. But really, actually, in hindsight, it became the perfect time to start a mortgage bank. And we talked about that. We said, man, the biggest opportunity in the history of mortgage banking is probably right on the other side of this crisis. And I've always been a pretty optimistic guy. And as a young guy, having an older guy tell me this was a good idea, that was probably all the encouragement I needed. And we set forth with a pretty big vision.
What do you think Toby saw in you? I mean, because think about it.
I wonder that a lot.
If you're thinking
really
8 years back, he's 62.
Yeah.
Most people are thinking about retiring at 62.
And he could have. Yeah, Toby could have. There's not a bone in his body that I think retirement resonates with. So that wasn't something that he was going to do. That's just not who he is. And I've honestly asked him that a lot. And I don't know exactly, because he could have worked with a ton of partners. I mean, he could have had his pick of people to work with. But there was something really special about our relationship very early on. I saw him as a mentor. I saw him as a man who had a lot of gifts and skill sets that I wanted to learn more from. Had a great family and had run a really successful business. And I was kind of seeking him out as a mentor, even though that wasn't like the popular word at that time. It's like this new thing. Everyone's looking for mentors, but Toby really was that for me. And I just think we had a very deep trust and an aligned vision. And I wasn't scared of his idea and vision of, hey, man, let's go start this mortgage bank and take over this industry. And I thought, man, that sounded like a pretty good idea. So maybe I was the first guy to say yes. I don't know.
No, I doubt you were. You started with a name.
Yep.
Different than where you are today.
Yeah.
And that didn't come until 5 years after. You're way down the path.
Yeah, it's like Chick-fil-A. We're not Chick-fil-A out of the gate, right?
Right.
We were New American Mortgage. And thought behind that was there have been a lot of mortgage companies called New America this, New American this, and we thought, man, this is this really ubiquitous name, and maybe people will get confused and think we are actually a bigger company than we actually are. They won't know where this is kind of like, very, very haphazard group of 4 or 5 guys coming together to try to start something. They think they associated with something bigger. And so yeah, we named ourselves New American Mortgage. I mean, we got that all the time. Oh, I've heard of you guys. I've heard of you guys. Oh, great, fantastic. And we just kind of parlayed that name that was pretty ubiquitous into just a little bit of credibility, just a teeny bit of credibility in the marketplace. And at that time, that's really what we needed. We didn't want people to know there was just 3 or 4 of us, because you go, do you really have $500,000 to loan me for my house? You had to have some credibility. So that was a tough thing to establish in the early days.
Well, I mean, if you just drive right through any city in America, there's small loan offices with 2 or 3 or 4 men and women in it.
Yep.
You could have just been that.
Yep.
But now you're so different today. What gave you the belief? Is it something inside? What gave you the belief that you could go beyond a 2, 3, 4 person shop with what you created your name to be a little bigger to now what you are today and probably what your vision is in the future? Yeah,
I think neither Toby or myself ever had a small vision. I just didn't have any interest in it. There's nothing wrong with those shops. I mean, my father ran a True Value hardware store my whole life growing up.
Dennis, right?
Dennis. Dennis never had more, I think, than 3 or 4 employees. Man, he provided for our family. I could not have asked for a better father, provider, and today, just best friend. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's a great vision of life. It's just never what kind of grabbed my heart. My heart was always kind of grabbed around scale, around doing something significant, around moving the needle nationally. And I thought there was so much opportunity. I thought, man, if we create something of value, a place where people would actually be drawn to come work, man, we have a better option. I was watching all these companies around the U.S. that even if they were having success professionally, they were destroying lives and destroying families. People, the stories were just rampant of like, man, that's great. I became a salesperson in the mortgage industry. And you kind of see this kind of played out in movies like The Big Short, right? I made tons of money. I lost my mind. I blew my family up, and things were left in wreckage. And I'm like, man, it doesn't need to be that way. And if we can create an alternative, why wouldn't everybody want to join? Like, why wouldn't everyone want to come be a part of this thing? And so that was really my perspective. I said, I don't know that we'll get every loan officer, but man, I think there's an opportunity for us to create something that is so attractive that we'll get a bunch. We'll get a bunch, and that was the idea. So, man, if we only build it that 2 or 3 people want to come, man, we haven't built something significant enough.
You mentioned your dad, Dennis. One of my favorite questions to ask is, who are leaders that have influenced your thinking?
Yeah.
Your dad's clearly made a big impression on you. One, what does he think about all that you and your family and more movement has achieved? Yeah. That's the first part. And the second part is, who are some of those leaders that you look up to or you look to model yourself after as you've kind of evolved from a leadership perspective? Yeah, no, that's a great one. Yeah, my dad is clearly first and foremost the single man in my life that has most impacted my vision of what it means to be a great leader. I didn't appreciate, even I think as a young boy, I don't think you appreciate some of these lessons until maybe you have kids yourself and you look back as a 40-year-old dad to appreciate what a great dad you had. But my dad wasn't a man of a lot of words. He just was a very faithful guy that every morning at 5 o'clock left the house to run a hardware store 6 days a week. Wasn't at a lot of my games, after school, because he was working. He was working till 7 o'clock, at night. And I worked with him a lot on the weekends. And I just saw my dad faithfully, day after day, going in, working hard and honoring and loving the people he worked with. I watched, our family, we didn't have a whole lot of money, but what money we had, we oftentimes would give back to help his employees when they got into kind of rough times. I watched him employ young men and women in the neighborhood that were 10, 12, 13 years old and were essentially homeless. Young girls that were getting pregnant at 13, 14, him buying supplies for their babies, helping them through those difficult times in life. And he wasn't talking to me about those things. I was just watching him play those things out. I watched him put in air conditioning units into older women's homes when, man, they couldn't afford the AC unit and they had no idea how to put it in themselves. And my dad was just loving and caring for his customers. And it was really those same principles that were anchored in my mind as we thought about starting a company. I said, man, of course we're going to have an organization, man, that loves and serves our teammates well, that loves and serves our customers well, and then loves and serves the communities that we're a part of. And that just felt very natural. I look back and it was so natural because it was those same lessons that were poured into me by my father while I was growing up. Well, now you look at what movement does today, and those are almost reflected in programs.
Yeah.
I mean, the giving back program that the employees do, over $1 million that was generated and given to 366 employees.
Yeah,
I mean, these are like, I mean, what your dad did, now you're pouring back into your business, and that's pretty. There's almost a direct match.
It is, and a lot of those programs, people ask, man, how'd you start these? The programs were put in place because they were just corporate reflections of what we did naturally and organically. It wasn't like we didn't do this and all of a sudden, hey, we have a program, so now we give to one another. We give to employees as they're in need. No, we would always give to employees as they were in need. And we got so big, we had to create a program to facilitate that giving, right?
But what's unique about it, okay? You're in it every day, so you don't think it's probably that unique. But what's unique is that the employee base can give directly from their paycheck to this program.
Oh, they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
To help their fellow employees.
Yeah.
It doesn't just come from some corporate account that nobody knows where the money comes from. I mean, it comes from their colleagues.
That's absolutely right. It's team members giving to team members. We match every dollar donated to the fund, dollar for dollar. But we actually have almost 70% of the team members give to the fund. And I think there's just something intrinsic to all of us that say, I want to be a part of a community that cares. And I want to be a community member that cares about people in my community that are in need. There's something that resonates as good and right, because we all know that at some point in life, we're going to be in need. I'm going to be in need. You're going to be in need. And I want to have people around me that I know will step up to help me out of the ditch when I fall into it. And so we've talked about that a lot, and you create that trust, and yet we actually receive more dollars in than we can even give every single month because employees are so passionate about being part of a LoveWorks fund.
It's just awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's just one of the most. Think of mortgage brokers that have options to go workplaces. Right?
Well, you know what's really cool? This is really, really neat. I found this out last month. I looked at the top 10 mortgage lenders in the U.S. and we've helped 3 of the other top 10 mortgage lenders in the U.S. set up their own internal company care funds. And I think 7 of the top 10 lenders now have internal company care funds. And that was like the vision, man. We knew we were never going to be able to employ every single mortgage banker in the U.S. We didn't want to do that, but we wanted to set a new standard of excellence. New standard of excellence for what it looked like to have a corporate culture. And I've had 2 company presidents call me and go, hey, I'm so sick of my sales guys calling me asking why we don't have one of these. And we went, man, fabulous. We would love to give you this gift of what we've put together so that you can bless your employees the same way we have, man. And I told them, it's like, just the only thing I ask, call me next year and tell me one story. Just tell me one great story, man, of a transformed life.
Well, and you just think about it in that realm. These programs, you do them for the right reasons, but the benefit goes to recruiting, it goes to retaining talent. I mean, it goes well beyond just providing a fund to the employees in need. And I think whether you guys thought of that proactively or it's just a byproduct of what happened, it's a reality. And most organizations simply don't do it. And
more doing it all the time, though, man. Be encouraged. It's catching on.
It's catching on. 7 of the top 10 are.
Yeah.
One of the people that we haven't had a chance to talk about, and I think behind every great leader is a network or people behind him. And we've talked a little bit about your dad.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about Toby, but Michelle, your wife, okay? and your face lights up.
Oh,
okay?
man, yeah.
What has that relationship meant to you from a leadership perspective and what you've done at Movement?
Yeah. So Michelle and I, a lot of guys probably say this, Michelle and I have a pretty special relationship. She's been my best friend since we were 20 years old. So 40 now, so that's half my life that I've, and people used to talk about, hey man, they always say marry your best friend. I really thought that was kind of a cliche. And then I ended up doing just that. And man, I can tell you, it's been like an incredible journey, right? So I have the privilege and pleasure of being married to my best friend, the person I like to spend time with, love hanging out with, who I know always has my back. I married a half Italian, half Cuban girl from Jersey, all right? Like, this girl is down. She has my back. And that's the important thing, is in leadership, it can get kind of lonely. Sometimes it can get kind of lonely in positions of leadership. And when you go home, when I'm with my family, like, I know there's one place that I have absolute confidence that somebody has my back, and that's at my home with my wife.
It's awesome. Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks and CEO for many years, he actually said, people don't know how lonely it is at the top sometimes. Like, it seems like this glorious job, and then there's just decisions, really hard decisions that have to be made that only you can really make.
Yeah.
What are some of those decisions that you've been faced with in your 8 years as a leader that at times it feels lonely? And maybe you need Michelle to help you with it or other people to help you with it. But what are some of those things that have been difficult that you look back on, you say, either that wasn't that bad or it was that bad?
Yeah. So it's been interesting with movement because we were started as just an organic company, 4 employees, grown to over 4,000 team members, and in some ways it's become a vortex for relationships. Pretty much everyone I know, almost all my family members now work inside a movement. Lots of my friends, and man, that's such a compliment and that's such a blessing in so many ways. That's such a benefit to my life. I love getting to work with and be in community with people that I'm just naturally friends with and related to, and at times. As work happens, man, like real problems come up and real life comes up. And then when you're in the middle of when all your friend groups, when all your kind of peer groups work inside the organization that you lead, man, that can be a tough place to be sometimes. Because, I think for any of us as leaders, man, we really want to see our people thrive. We want to see our people flourish. And when we see somebody that's both maybe a friend or a family member that's inside our organization is not thriving, is not flourishing, the weight of that is just heavy. It's just heavy because you care about them not only as a team member in your company, but also just as a personal friend or as a family member, man. And so that one for me probably I feel like is unique when it's kind of a founder-owner, organic. Like if I was a CEO of a big company, I probably wouldn't have everybody I know working for it. The way this has worked out, it kind of is the case. And that's something it's been a lot to carry and bear. It's an incredible pleasure because I feel like 95% of it is just getting to spend time with and co-labor with my absolute best friends and family. But when it doesn't work well, man, it can be tough.
But, on that subject, I think we had a chance to look at movement and on Glassdoor. You have a 90% approval rating as a CEO. That's the good news. Some of the bad news and kind of the flip side to every story is that the culture rating on Glassdoor has dropped almost a full point in 2 years. And the main reason for that drop, it appears to us, is that there is some favoritism or nepotism in the business because you've surrounded yourself with those people. Yeah. And sometimes those people get treatment over others that aren't in that circle.
Yeah.
How often do you even think about that as people that are in your circle and then people that have come from the outside and are now in your circle?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think it's never something, you're never going to make everyone happy, right? But you do have to be cognizant of like when you see things like on Glassdoor where there's people feel less connected and don't feel loved and valued. Our mission statement is that we exist to love and value people, all people, not my friends, not my family, all people, right? And so if we have over 4,000 employees, that's a pretty broad base of folks to think about. And that means we have to be probably doubly intentional about extending programs that we had done once again that were very organic and very natural through relationships and systemize those more effectively through kind of big programs to draw people into that same kind of level of experience. So we have over 700 offices now, around the United States. And as you start dealing with geographic challenges, man, it gets exponentially more difficult to pour into folks and to really care about them because we think that's done in relationship. We think it's done. That's why we're building a second building right here in Indian Land, so that we can spend more time with people face to face and really see them up close and not have quite as much distribution geographically. Because I think a lot of that separation. That's one thing I underestimated as a leader. I figured, with technology and things, you go, hey man, it doesn't matter. You can be in China. You can be around the world because of technology. We can do business together. Right. We can work together. And what you realize really quickly is that relationships are much more difficult over distance, right? And that's been a big challenge for us is kind of bridging that geographic gap we have with offices around the U.S.
Well, and you've done such an incredible job. You're such a charismatic leader, and people really gravitate towards you. And then you've gone through this enormous growth spurt. How do you transfer your principles of leadership and the way that you think about leadership and all the things that are on the walls here at Movement down to now a rapidly growing workforce that you're having to promote a lot from within? Yep. You're having to promote mortgage brokers into sales managers that really have no sales management experience. How do you think about transferring that knowledge into them to ensure that people leave managers, they don't leave companies? Yeah. How do you think about transferring that knowledge to other people now?
Yeah, so one thing, we are actually really big on identifying leaders early and don't have any fear about that. So you haven't led before, like it's not on your resume. Work with Mark Miller someday at Chick-fil-A. And he says one of the number one things they look for is to give people opportunities to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. When you give them opportunities to succeed, conversely, they have an opportunity to fail also, right? But we look for
But isn't that what it's all about in some ways? I mean, movement doesn't start without you taking the risk of failure.
And that's kind of what I've told everybody. We had a market leader in here today from Cleveland, and I said I was our first market leader in Charlotte. And we use the word leader, not manager. So managers maintain, leaders initiate, leaders are going to grow. We had nothing to manage and maintain, so we had to have nothing but leaders. And I didn't have any formal training. I mean, there's no way I would be rehired to my position today. It wouldn't happen, right? But thankfully, I had a mentor, I had a guy who's willing to pour into me, and I was willing to kind of step up and use the gifts God had given me to lead. And so we've really encouraged that around the U.S. Say, first tell us you want to lead, and then we're going to intentionally pour into you. So we've actually developed the Movement Leadership Academy. We got some great young leaders that are leading that, and pouring into I think the next generation in some really unique ways that are specific to more recent generations and leveraging technology in ways where society's really changed. And folks, we find they don't want to work in quite such a hierarchical, bureaucratic environment. They want to feel that they're part of a team, feel empowered, know what the boundaries are, and to have a sense of play, purpose, and potential in what they do. And so we have a leadership academy that really is emphasizing helping folks find play, purpose, and potential at work.
Isn't it amazing, as I think of all the stages that you've probably been through, like from the very early stages of just trying to make this thing work, to now like really scaling and not even touching some people that you hire on it. I mean, it's got to be difficult. But one of the things that I've seen you do that I think a lot of the best CEOs I've ever seen are really keen on is having big celebrations and big parties. And like they make it a big event on purpose. Yeah. And you've taken to that. Yeah. Why have you taken to that? And why are these Christmas parties and big events so important to you?
Well, I think they are. It's massively important to celebrate. You have to celebrate your milestones, man. You have got to, because it anchors in our purpose of what it is that we're doing every day, right? Like if you don't take some time every now and then to celebrate, man, life just goes by too quickly, and we don't kind of enter in that regular state of thankfulness. I think that's so important to having a positive attitude in what you're doing. So we want to regularly stop, look back, and be thankful for the incredible journey we've been on. We also want to celebrate with families. So the big thing for us with Christmas is we know that, man, we don't have a vision that people have a job anymore. Like we have a career, we have a calling, we have something we are pouring our life into. We talk about people spend more time in the work environment than they do with their families. And so I want spouses and kids to know what it is their spouse is investing their life into. And so a Christmas party for us is a time, invite your spouse, come stop and celebrate and understand this big vision, this community that your spouse is a part of that is significantly changing the way business is done in a lot of ways and pouring into communities in transformative ways. And that is just one of the most special things I think we do each and every year. It's one of the things we get the best feedback on. And it's one of the things I think that people think about during the year as we're just living out our day-to-day. We're thinking about what it is we're going to celebrate. So we got to create tomorrow's celebrations today. Yeah. Right. We got to create those celebrations today. And we do it, make sure we do it very, very regularly.
Create celebrations today. I mean, how great is that?
Oh, man.
I've never thought of it, but I mean, to look back, which kind of leads to, I mentioned Howard Schultz earlier, but he mentioned the most underrated characteristic of a leader is being vulnerable. One of the biggest things we've seen that most managers and leaders are struggling with across our research has been that they're not asking their people for feedback about how they're doing. How, as the CEO of a major corporation, do you get feedback about how you're doing?
Oh, man, yeah. So I think my football background prepared me well for that one. I actually get twitchy when I don't get feedback, right? Because my dad used to always tell me, hey, man, worry when the coach stops coaching you. That's when you need to get concerned, not when they're giving you a lot of feedback. It wasn't always such pleasant feedback in the football days. But so that was always something that was very natural for me. So I seek it out constantly. I mean, I'm always, every time we meet with our loan officer, hey, what else can we do for you? What else can we be doing for you to help you with your career? What can we be doing for you, personally? And then also from our team members. And I think that becomes, people like to do surveys, this stuff. If you're doing nothing, that's better than doing nothing, I suppose. But I think it's got to be an organic, natural desire to serve from the leader. If you're really coming at it from a servant's heart, a servant's asking their master, their boss, what is it that I can do for you? What is it that you want? What is it that you need? And then trying to understand that and think about what gifts and abilities I have to meet those needs. If it's not naturally flowing like that from your leadership, I think it's really hard to manage through just some kind of like stale survey that goes out there. Hey, corporate heard you. We saw this many things. I think there is something true to what Henry Ford said. If I'd asked my customers what they want, they would have said a faster horse. He says something. Steve Jobs, right? Don't ask people what they want, show them. I think there needs to be an intuitive nature of understanding the pulse of your organization, understanding how you can serve people, maybe even meeting their needs before they can articulate them, but always being willing to ask and always assuming, man, that there are things that you're missing and there are things as a leader where you need to grow. And that's, I think where it is. For me, it might be easier for me because I'm just, painfully aware of shortcomings in places I need to, continue to work to grow.
The argument to that would be how quality of the feedback you're going to get from your people when you're telling your boss how they're doing, right? I mean, the guy that could, or the woman that could relinquish my job or send me packing, you could get some data that might not be that great, but I think one of the things you've done so well is surround yourself with people not only internally but externally that can influence you and speak into your life, which I know you've done a great job of. Have you sought out that kind of influence? Yeah. Or has it just kind of come to you because of the success that you've had?
No, we've definitely sought some out, and I think, one of the men who I've been really fortunate to spend some time with in my life was Admiral Mike Mullen, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And he actually touched on that point. Feedback you get from folks in your organization. What he said to me was this: he said, the larger the organization you lead, the more you'll be managed up. And he's like, Case, you won't even see it coming, man, and they won't even know they're doing it. Like these people, they'll love you, they'll love the organization, and they're going to manage you up. And the harder you'll have to work to get to the truth. And that resonated. I think we had about 1,000 employees when Admiral Mullen shared that with me. And I was taking notes, I was listening, I was trying to receive it. I can tell you today I understand it much more profoundly than I did then, and I imagine 5 years from now I'll understand it at an even deeper level. And I think your point is well taken and absolutely true. The larger the organization you run, the more you're managed up and the harder you have to work to get to the truth.
What's the future of Movement Mortgage, right? I mean, you've painted this beautiful vision about what this company can be and should be and will be probably. In your mind, what's the future of Movement Mortgage moving forward? Yeah.
I think we still, first and fundamentally, have a lot of runway left in the purchase mortgage space. We have about 1.5% market share, right? So 98.5% of the market is still available to go get. I think Countrywide topped that at like 20. So we think we have a pretty good bit of runway left in front of us, which is really exciting, just for the core business of what we do day in, day out, trying to serve home buyers in that process. I think if I step back for a second, what really excites me is the opportunity we have to set an example for other companies, to help maybe some other folks think about what could it look like to organize my corporate culture differently, to think about programs like Love Works, to create a company care fund to pour back into folks, some of the leadership work that we're doing. How do I think about leading millennials, the next generation of leaders, and empowering them to be their best selves and to work in an engaging way in the workplace? I saw Simon Sinek did a talk that the number one cause of bullying was children whose parents weren't happy at work. So there's an incredible opportunity, I think, for those of us who lead in the workplace to think about reshaping what that experience looks like to really benefit the team members. And it's some of, I think, those lessons, as well as pouring back into our communities, that I hope to be able to be a catalyst for change within our industry, and then even broader industries and other companies and organizations that have kind of come to us to look at what we've done that's been successful for us.
You've gone even a step further than most CEOs would go in terms of movement school, creating a foundation. I mean, you guys have gone, I know that marketing talk sounds good, but you're really walking the walk in terms of serving the communities and serving people, not only in the movement buildings and its employees, but outside. Yeah. Do you foresee that continuing, and how, maybe the better, why have you done that?
I think this just gets into our core fundamental belief of loving people. And again, I watched my father. He was part of a community in D.C. D.C. It was the murder capital of the world while I was growing up. He was in a rough part of D.C. So there was a lot of need. And he just kind of felt like, if I'm going to be a business that serves this community and sells sand and nails and all the little things a hardware store does. Man, I'm also going to be about caring for the people in the community. And we've said the same thing. So that I think it's a responsibility of the companies that do commerce in a community to be about loving the marginalized in that community and offering them hope. And so we've started a movement school. I also think that it's an unfortunate reality that in the not-for-profit space, a lot of businesses have given their money, but not their business acumen. One thing we've been pretty good at moving is scale and thinking about replicating models. And we go, man, if we could apply some of those same methodologies to charter schools and that are serving the urban poor, there's this real opportunity to scale those across the United States and really affect dramatic change in the educational sector in the U.S., which I think Bill Gates said, he'd rather tackle world disease than education in the U.S., right? So we think there's real opportunity there by applying business acumen to solve some of these big problems, and we want to work with other business leaders who are kind of similarly passionate.
Well, I know the kind of impact you're having, not only in this building, but in the community, and I hope your story of leadership and your journey and your intentionality of growing and learning and keeping going is a model that should be replicated. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you do, not only here, but in the community.
No, well, John, thank you, man. I think it's, you've taken your work of storytelling and leadership training and really casting vision for future leaders, and you've helped us tell that story, man. So thank you for helping us be this movement of change.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.